Doctor Who. Whenever any fellow nerds hear those two words in that particular order, a plethora of memories suddenly burst into their minds. From the familiar noises of the TARDIS, or the time and relative dimension in space for those not in the know, to the visual designs of the alien life forms both classic and new, the franchise has certainly left its mark not just on fans, but on science fiction as a whole. With such a reputation, however, there are bound to be a few blemishes which hardcore critics are bound to find. One of these blemishes debuted in 1997 as an attempt to revive the then-cancelled series long before the second attempt in 2005. While the second attempt would lead to success, the first attempt would only be known as Doctor Who, the TV movie, aka The Enemy Within. As I've just stated, this movie would have revived Doctor Who much like Series 9 in 2005, had it not been for a few variables. Number 1. All but one of the studios the BBC asked for a spot to air their movie in America declined. The one that accepted was Fox. I do not watch much Fox, but even I am aware that asking them to help you get your science fiction TV show on the air is like asking a Dalek not to kill anything. You are quite clearly asking for the impossible. Number 2. The ratings for the movie in the US were abysmal in comparison to the UK's. This was due to the movie making its debut during Sweeps Week in America, which essentially means shows desperate for ratings push the film aside. Most notably the episode of RaMoaN, where the prominent male lead Dan Connor had a heart attack during a wedding. Talk about bad timing. And finally, number 3. There were certain creative choices made in the movie that tampered with the in-canon lore of Doctor Who, which made die-hard fans hate this movie to this day, all of which will be elaborated as we go further down the line. So as you can see, the film was doomed to fail from the get-go. But it takes more than poor timing and a few bad choices to be hated by most of the Doctor Who fandom, if not used as an explicit example for what not to do in a Doctor Who story. So what exactly warrants all of this fan rage? Well, get your sonic screwdrivers and some jelly babies, because we're about to take a look. We begin our adventure into madness with a voiceover from the 8th Doctor, Paul McGann. He states that the Master, a fellow renegade Time Lord who is the yin to his yang, was captured by the Daleks and put on trial for his heinous crimes. When he was sentenced to death, the Master made only one strange request, that the Doctor transport his remains back to their home planet of Gallifrey in order to be properly dealt with. Right out of the gate, we have a few problems. Number 1. Why do the Daleks kill the Master, a Time Lord who has attempted to destroy them and claimed the role of supreme creature of the universe before them, and not the Doctor, a Time Lord who has constantly stood in their way by either destroying them or putting a monkey wrench in their plans? Seriously, the Doctor has been way more of a threat than the Master. Number 2. Why would the Doctor go along with this plan? Sure, he has a soft spot for the Master, as they were apparently, classmates at the Academy, but he knows how dangerous his foe is. Why would he go along with such a suspicious plan? He even makes note about how strange this request was.
Then he made his last, and I thought somewhat curious request.
Number 3. Why would the Daleks even hold a trial for the Master? For a race that constantly shouts what they're going to do to any inferior life form within range, you would think that they would have simply shot the Master as soon as they found him. Finally, and on a more nitpicky topic, why do the Daleks sound so weird in this scene? It's very obvious that the creator did not use the same voice effect as the BBC, as it just sounds like Alvin and the Chipmunks are shouting the iconic "Exterminate!" Well, in any case, the Doctor somehow gets the Master's remains without immediately getting his organs scrambled by the Daleks. And we are introduced to the 7th Doctor, who Paul McGann will replace, Sylvester McCoy. I have to say, credit where credit is due. The creators of the movie actually got an actor from the original show rather than just have the new guy on the screen without prior introduction. It allows the role to be passed down with grace. Hopefully. Also, can we just talk about the interior of the TARDIS? I don't know why, but I just love everything about this version of the TARDIS. There's a nice balance between a cozy house with the bookcase, the living room complete with a rug, side table and cups of tea and jelly babies. But there is also, of course, the usual TARDIS console with all the buttons, levers, and colorful lights. There's even a nice little shrine which the Master's remains are currently escaping from— wait, what? Yes, it seems the Master has somehow regenerated, in spite of his pre-obliterated form supposedly being his final regeneration, or basically a Time Lord's extra life. Apparently, though, through some convoluted plan, he somehow regenerated into a being called a Deathworm Morphant, some kind of serpent-like creature that feeds on people to absorb their knowledge and memories. It has never made an appearance apart from one audio story which takes place after this movie. So, in other words, this creature is entirely pointless apart from giving the Master a chance to tamper with the TARDIS and force the Doctor to land on Earth, San Francisco, December 30th, 1999. So, what kind of adventures await him here? Yes, it seems that for once the Doctor landed in the wrong place at the wrong time, as some gangsters were chasing down some rivals with rifles, and these trigger-happy Nimrods shot the Doctor as soon as he stepped out. I would like to take a break from the review to remind everyone that this movie was meant for children, just like the original show. Children just saw the Doctor, the main character, get shot by gangsters. Children just witnessed the Doctor, a man who has avoided all sorts of gunfire from man and aliens alike, just get shot down by New York gangsters. If your child has not wet themselves in terror, they will in just a moment, as the Doctor is taken to the hospital with Eric Roberts. Okay, I know next to nothing about Eric Roberts as an overall actor, but to those who hate this movie because of his role, I perfectly understand why. What am I talking about? Well, we'll have to wait and see, as the Doctor is carted off to the hospital to get his body x-rayed. The doctors pull out the bullets, but are confused by his sporadic heartbeat, even though the x-rays say that John Doe has 2 hearts. So they call upon their top cardiologist, Amazing Grace, who is on a date with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Brad McPointless. And what constitutes as a date for Grace? Why, a night at the opera, of course. And of course, no one bats an eye as she rushes into the emergency room clad in puffy blue dress as her boyfriend calls about splitting up with her. Again. So now we get to the horrifying part, as the surgery on the Doctor begins. So it starts off with the Doctor waking up after being pumped full of drugs to basically tell the surgeons not to do exactly what they do anyway.
What are you about to do? Stop.
Mr. You're going to be all right.
No, I am not human. I am not like you.
Then, Grace pokes around in his hearts, having absolutely no idea what she is doing due to the Doctor's Gallifreyan anatomy. Meanwhile, her boss is showing her off to his superiors right before the horror truly begins. After a few agonizing minutes of escalation, the Doctor screams in pain and slumps back down on the slab. The Doctor just died on screen from humans doing what they do best. Tampering with something they know nothing about. On a movie made for children. Brilliant work, people. I know absolutely nothing about how surgery works, but if I were in Grace's shoes, I would have thought maybe, just maybe, that doing surgery on a man who has told me not to do so is a bad idea, especially when all signs point to this man having more than one heart, rather than dismiss it as double exposure from the X-rays. Meanwhile, the Master has hitched a ride in Eric Roberts' jacket in order to slither down his throat while he sleeps, because this was not creepy enough. But the reveal of our villain's new form will have to wait, as we have to dedicate a scene to some creepy autopsy specialist cracking jokes over the Doctor's corpse, because that is exactly what fans and children wanted to see in a Doctor Who movie. I apologize for constantly bringing this up, but classic Doctor Who, even modern-day Doctor Who, is mainly about a time-traveling alien visiting exotic worlds and helping those in need through science fiction logic. Here, in this film that is supposed to revive the franchise, all we've seen is the lead character get shot by gangsters and die through surgery while his mortal enemy reenacts his favorite hentai. In a kid's movie! No matter, we finally, and I do mean finally, get to see Sylvester McCoy pass his role down to his replacement, Paul McGann. For those not in the know, Time Lords can regenerate their bodies after they suffer a fatal injury 13 times. Unless you find some loopholes, but that is a discussion for another day. This is basically a way to keep the show alive should a producer or actor feel like changes need to be made. The way this regeneration goes about is strange, to say the least, as that creepy morgue assistant from before is actually watching Frankenstein while the regeneration is happening. I'm sure at the time this felt clever on paper, but on screen it feels pretentious, as if the writer is yelling, "Do you get it?" In either case, the Doctor bursts out of the morgue and stumbles around the darkened hospital, humming the opera he heard during his surgery/death, making the scene unintentionally creepy. It doesn't help that he stumbles into a defunct wing of the hospital, which is full of broken equipment and rainwater, and yells into the sky while clips of Eric Roberts wearing tacky contacts fades in and out of the scene. Which brings us to the one fatal flaw of the Doctor Who TV film. Eric Roberts as the Master. When one thinks about the classic version of the Master, they look back to Roger Delgado or Peter Grant's performances. A cunning figure in the shadows, finding new and dangerous ways to dominate the universe. Here, Eric Roberts portrays the Master as this monster in human skin, which, while technically accurate in the movie's context, is not what the character is in spite of his prior crimes. He is also quite creepy in a disturbing way, as we see him meet Chang Li,
the Asian child,
who brought the Doctor to the hospital to begin with. He stole the Doctor's belongings, claiming he was a friend of his, hoping to sell his stuff for cash, but uses the TARDIS key to get inside, where the Master is waiting, somehow. One would think the TARDIS would have kept him out, but I guess it just lets anyone in for this movie, especially if it likes you.
Well, I never. The TARDIS really likes you.
Back at the hospital, the Doctor has found his new duds and is following Grace in an attempt to get his memories back. This is another creepy scene, as he is practically glued to an angry Grace who wants no part of his antics. Why is she angry? Because her former boss wanted to cover up the fact that a man with two hearts existed, thus causing her to quit.
I can't afford to lose you.
Wait, what are you doing?
A man died last night because you lost your way.
You bet I did. You saw the x-ray. The guy had two hearts.
And now, without a body or without records, no one need know he was even here.
You can't do this.
Let me take care of this, Grace.
If you do this, I'll quit.
You don't mean that?
The Doctor convinces her to take him home with her by pulling out the surgical probe from his chest and yelling at her because that's not disturbing at all.
Please. I have two hearts. You have to get me out of here before they kill me again. Please. Please, you have to help me. Try!
As the Doctor and Grace interact with one another, by which I mean Grace just thinks the Doctor is crazy in spite of having two hearts, the Master spins a story for Chang about how the Doctor is the bad guy, stealing his regenerations to do horrible things. Like be Genghis Khan. He then makes a deal with his protege where if he does as he is told, he will be paid with gold dust.
Gold dust?
What, did the Doctor stop by the island of Sodor and make a trade with Mr. Conductor or something? Regardless, Chang accepts and the Master takes him to the Eye of Harmony, the device that powers the TARDIS. I know I said earlier that the TARDIS looked amazing, but for some reason I cannot get behind this cathedral look for the cloister room. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because there is somehow light, wind, and bats in here. Or maybe it's because, to me personally, it contrasts heavily with that cozy home feeling of the console room I mentioned before. In either case, it doesn't matter, as one of the biggest reasons fans hate this made-for-television film is about to present itself. The Doctor and Grace go out for a walk, and the Doctor starts to regain his memories of Gallifrey, much to his own joy, and kisses Grace with passion because... reasons. The Master, meanwhile, has Chang open the Eye of Harmony using his own eyes, as for some reason the Eye of Harmony, a device created by Gallifreyans for Gallifreyans, can only be opened by having a set of human eyes stare into it. When the eye is open, not only does the Doctor regain all of his memories, but the Master also makes an interesting discovery.
The Doctor is half human.
For any person who hates this series, watch the response of any die-hard fan of this show at the mention of this phrase. The concept of the Doctor spontaneously becoming half human was despised so much that it has been retconned in the subsequent novels and audio dramas as some sort of complicated trick against the Master, and has never been addressed since. Moving right along, the Eye of Harmony allows the Master and Chang to see what the Doctor is seeing and hearing thanks to his human eye. But the Doctor closes one of his eyes to cut the transmission short. Meanwhile, he tells Grace about the Master and his plan to use the Eye of Harmony to steal his remaining regenerations away to live once again. Grace, who has been humoring the Doctor and his talks about time traveling and alien worlds, responds accordingly, running away and calling for an ambulance to take him to the loony bin. This woman has proof that this man is something other than human, both in spoken and biological form, and her first thought is this man with two hearts is off his rocker. Not only that, but even when the Doctor shows her that the world's molecular level is being distorted and changed by walking through glass, she thinks she has lost her mind as well and calls for another ambulance. Give the other companions some credit, at least most of them realize real quick that the Doctor and everything about and around him is not human. Grace is just stubborn and thick-headed. But wouldn't you know it, an ambulance does arrive, with Chang and the Master behind the wheel. The Doctor, despite having visions of what the Master looks like, does not recognize his enemy simply because he is wearing a pair of sunglasses. That is no exaggeration. In spite of the two of them briefly talking about time travel, because Grace still does not believe any of it, it takes the sunglasses flying off the Master's head from a sharp stop to reveal his true identity to the Doctor. The Master responds by spitting his deathworm juices, on Grace's wrist. So what does the Doctor do in this situation? Does he use his cunning wit, or maybe some of his fighting skills to combat his ancient foe? No, instead he uses a fire extinguisher. Yes, a fire extinguisher. A fire extinguisher is the Master's Achilles heel in this film, as rather than fight back, he sits in the foam and cries out to Chang to clean him up as his enemy gets away.
I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world!
The Master of Time and Space, ladies and gentlemen. So the Doctor and Grace run up to a police officer at the end of a traffic block and perform a series of confusing events to get his motorcycle. The Doctor offers him jelly babies, no doubt in an attempt to get the Tom Baker fans happy, even though they've probably left by now. Then he steals the police officer's gun and threatens to shoot himself. Grace then takes the gun, tests it, and then properly threatens the police officer.
Thank you.
So I guess now Grace finally accepts that aliens and time travel exists, and thus does not care about breaking a few laws now. Well, in either case, it works, as the Doctor and Grace are chased down the road by the Master and Chang, who eventually take a shortcut to beat them to their destination. Where's their destination, you might ask? Well, through some technobabble brouhaha, the Doctor explains that the TARDIS must be repaired and the Eye of Harmony closed in order to save the world from being destroyed because, of course. To do that, the Doctor requires a piece of a beryllium atomic clock, which is coincidentally being unveiled nearby. The Master sneaks his way in with Chang and covers more people in his juices. Ew. But the Doctor and Grace steal the piece of the clock necessary for fixing the TARDIS. But not before the Doctor once again mentions his half-human heritage, much to the disdain of the audience.
I'm half human. On my mother's side.
Shut up, just shut up, shut up, shut up, shut it up.
The two make their way back to the TARDIS, where an admittedly funny scene happens. The Doctor and Grace finally start working on the TARDIS, but it seems the Master has taken over Grace's mind and made her his slave. This causes her to knock the Doctor out, as the Master and Chang finally arrive to enact the Master's plan. That plan is as follows. Restrain the Doctor, have Chang open the Eye of Harmony, and have the Doctor stare into it, which will, somehow, transfer his regenerations to the Master, thus killing the Doctor. But before any of this can happen, the Master lets it slip that the Doctor didn't steal his regenerations, and Chang detracts from the plan.
Open the eye!
No! You lied to me!
This leads to a disturbingly creepy scene where the Master puts his hands on Chang's face, only to twist his head to the point of snapping. And now the Master has to undo his mind voodoo on Grace to get her human eyes back. How does he do it? By snogging her, of course. Ew. So, the Eye of Harmony is opened by a reluctant Grace, the transfer begins, and the world is on its way to oblivion. Can Grace repair the console in time? Will the world truly end? Will the Master finally succeed? Well, the series has continued since 2005 in spite of this movie, so what do you think? Yes, Grace, an average human mind you, jumpstarts the TARDIS and sends it into temporal orbit. Having no idea what that means, Grace heads back to the cloister room to free the Doctor, only to be killed by the Master upon succeeding. So the Time Lords have their not-so-epic battle, resulting in the Master being sucked into 2007, where he will return in a much better reboot of this franchise. So the day is won, the world is saved again, but victory is bittersweet. The Doctor carries the corpses of Grace and Chang up a flight of stairs into the light to mourn. Until the TARDIS performs a Deus Ex Machina and revives them, much to the Doctor's delight.
Did you see that? What a sentimental old thing this TARDIS is.
He then drops them off in the new year, says goodbye to both of them, mainly Grace, who he kisses once more, and sets off for more adventures which never got televised or even created because this movie flopped harder than a fish thrown off a cliff. I will not deny there are some good elements to this film. As I said before, I like the design and aesthetics of the TARDIS console room, as it has a comfortable atmosphere to it. I enjoyed Paul McGann's performance as the Doctor, as he nails the character perfectly. He's a being of immense knowledge, but at the same time, he is exceedingly energetic and almost childlike in a way. However, there are less enjoyable elements in the film. The soundtrack is a tad repetitive at times, in spite of its good moments. The side characters are dull, boring, idiotic, or irritating. And the main villain was written and portrayed completely wrong. The Master is supposed to be a cunning villain in the shadows, much like a Bond villain. This Master is a disgusting sack of slime who acts nothing like his previous predecessors. It's as if the writer for this film did not do his homework on the character and just made his own version, accuracy be damned. This film was simply painful to watch for me, as it just felt like a slap in the face to me as a fan of the franchise. Do not get me wrong, some of the episodes in the classic era and even the modern day era are not written perfectly, But at least they do not tamper with pre-established lore or characters of a franchise in a way that makes fans almost immediately rage upon viewing it. But I suppose if you want to ignore all that and just watch a silly film and maybe make a drinking game out of it, be my guest. Just don't blame me for the resulting hangover and liver damage. In the meantime, this is RaMoaN saying, never stop rambling. This has been Rambles and Mumbles of a Nerd, and I thank you for watching this episode.